You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
So excited to get into our fifth factor of boosting the metabolism. So over the past 5 weeks, I've gone over why the body begins to down-regulate its ability to burn calories so that you can consume more food without gaining weight. Well, the problem is this, that for many people out there, because of all sorts of different lifestyle factors, unbeknownst to them, they've slowed their metabolism over the past 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or even more. So the good thing is this. Once you realize what has happened, you can go about reversing the process. The problem is that so few of us ever figure out why we've been struggling as we've been struggling. Because there is always an answer. I struggled for many years simply because I didn't find out my why. But people out there knew it. And when I connected with them, I figured out my why. They showed it to me, and I began the process of healing. The same goes for weight loss. The same goes for wellness. The same goes for mental and emotional-based health as well. So here's the thing. What I'm trying to do is present to you a different side of the story. I want you to understand that weight gain is not all about calories in, calories out. People keep going back to that, and I love that people are, and I see it, that people are tagging me in the comments of other people's posts. And I don't want to be contradictory to other people. I don't want to start arguments, but I do believe that there is a healthy debate that needs to be started where people have to understand it is not just about calories in, calories out. And honestly, that is very outdated information. The research I'm going to present to you today is a decade old. Now, the problem is it takes 20, 30 years for really good research to make it into the mainstream. I don't want you to have to wait that long. And I also don't want well-meaning health coaches, doctors, personal trainers, nutritionists out there still subscribing to the notion that, you just need to eat less and you need to move your body more. Well, that's certainly true in the beginning. There's no doubt about that. But what happens when you get below 1,600 calories a day? I mean, people should be able to eat 1,600 calories a day. I mean, you really should be able to eat some food. And what happens when eating 1,600 calories a day makes you gain weight? Well, a lot of those people out there, the gurus out there would say, eat less. Okay, so the person goes down to 1,400. They maybe lose another pound over the next month or so. And they say, well, I plateaued. What do I need to do? They just say, well, eat less because it's all about calories in, calories out and burn maintenance. And so they go down to 1,200. Well, here's the problem. Once you get down to 1,200 calories a day, you're not getting enough micronutrients. You're not. And that's because I do this every day in my practice. And I plug people's diet into a specific software that allows me to see what vitamins, minerals, electrolytes, etc. that their body's getting. And they are deficient every single time. The only time you're not is when you're taking a nutritional supplement product like an all-in-one that gives you the nutrients that you do need, which is why I'm so big on the daily nutritional support and the daily fruit and vegetable blend and the daily omega-3, like those types of things, because people bodies are starved for nutrients. And that's because they take their calories way too low, or they're on a very lopsided macro diet, meaning high fat, low carb, low protein, or high protein, low carb, low fat. So the thing is, when we try to manipulate our body, things go wrong in the long term, but never in the short term typically. The body actually feels better oftentimes in the short term because there's a surge of adrenaline. And people don't realize that, like on a carnivore-based diet, you typically feel good for the first couple weeks, sometimes even months. And the reason is, well, all that gut bacteria that was overgrown, it's not being fed because there's no fructo, oligo, di, mono, and polysaccharides, which are simply certain carbohydrates that feed good bacteria and bad bacteria, but it's kind of like wiping them out almost with like taking an antibiotic because there's nothing there to be fed. Well, that's not a good thing in the long run, but in the short term, sure, you might have less anti-inflammatory. In the long term, you're doing a lot of work on that gallbladder to produce that much bile, to break down that much body fat, and also that much meat very well could increase norepinephrine, and you can look up the studies on that. I'll bring you that in the future as well. That's why, again, I will never run out of topics on the Cabral concept because with all of the lopsided education out there, that I have to try to bring balance to it. And it doesn't mean that I'm better than, it doesn't mean that I'm smarter than, it simply means that I'm after the truth and I hold no dogma. I have no dog in the race, as they say. It does not matter to me. It honestly doesn't. I think of everyone as my family. What would I do for my family? What's the best answer for my family? And it can be conventional medicine based sometimes. And it's, well, for the majority of times, it's natural based, but it's always balanced. And it goes back to traditional naturopathy, which is called right living, getting people to live right. And that's why fasting for prolonged periods of time is not best for everyone. Now, most people, 99+% of the population, needs to be doing a fast, but should it be 12, 14, 16 hours? Well, it depends on the person. Should they be doing a once a week, 24-hour fast? Well, sure, if they're healthy, absolutely. But again, based on the individual. So let's get you healthy first. Today's podcast, though, is one more factor. And again, I invite you, and what I'll do to make it easy, because today is the last factor, is if you head on over to today's podcast, it's stephencabral.com/1440. So it's the fifth factor. All the factors are clearly laid out for you at stephencabral.com/fatlocity. And that's just FATLOSSITY. Nothing to buy there if you choose it's not the right fit for you. I just want you to read about how to rebalance the metabolism. Remember, weight loss is about metabolism, which is based on hormones. You have to understand that, and I'm going to go back to this, and I'll actually probably keep making the analogy. There are two individuals. They're both 5'8". One of them weighs 200 pounds. One of them weighs 150 pounds. Okay? Let's just put it this way. The person at 200 pounds, they're still 5'8". They eat 1,600 calories a day and they can't lose weight. The other person, 5'8", 150 pounds, they eat, let's say, 1,000 more calories, because this happens all the time. So they eat 2,600 calories or so, and they don't gain weight. And a lot of that is carbohydrates. What explains that? How is this possible? One person weighs 50 pounds less, and they eat even more calories, and they actually lose weight or they don't gain weight. The other person, if they ate just a smidge over 1,600 a day and they weigh 200 pounds, even though they should burn more calories because they weigh more weight, they weigh more, they actually gain weight. Why is this? It's because of the metabolism. It is not simply calories in, calories out. Because again, two people, 5'8", they should be able to eat the same. Well, it's not true. We know that there's something called body types or somatotypes, genotypes. We've talked about this from every different language standpoint. Ayurveda, we've talked about it from psychology with somatotypes, and we talked about it with modern science in genotypes. So please, I just don't want you to believe. That's it. The reason why I gave this little monologue in the beginning, this little rant, is because it's not that simple. You can't just say exercise more, eat less. It's not that simple. It is if you've never done it before, right? So sure, follow a good nutrition plan, follow a good exercise plan. And I want you to do that. I'm not dismissing that. Yes, of course, do that, of course. But what if that stops working for you? What if you plateau? Is there no hope for you? Of course not. But it just means that we need to get deeper. That weight loss or obesity is actually a dis-ease of the body. So let's treat it as so. Because a dis-ease of the body simply means that the person has too many deficiencies and or too many toxicities. Well, we can rebalance that. We can look at things like cortisol. We can look at things like leptin and ghrelin that we'll talk about today, two fat-burning hormones. We can look at sleep that we'll be talking about today, and melatonin and serotonin for appetite. We can look at insulin and blood sugar. All of these things matter, right? They all matter, and they are what happens when the person weighs 150 pounds at 5'8", and they're able to burn more on a daily basis. Their hormones have more daily metabolic burn. They're running at a faster rate, whereas the other person at 200 pounds, 5'8", they're more sluggish. Now, the example could simply be one person 5'3", and they weigh 160 pounds, and another person weighs 120, right? So if you're 5'3", you weigh 160, you weigh 120. Well, again, different weights, okay? If you're 160 and you want to be 120 at 5'3", we simply have to look at your metabolism. And again, for me, this is never about vanity, and it's always about health. If you are leaner, you have a much greater chance of living a longer, healthier life. That's just the facts. Again, I don't make these things up. You have less of a chance for cancer, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. And if we can wipe those out, your chances of living well into your 80s go way up, unless there's an accident. That's the truth. Again, I did a podcast on all of the factors of mortality. And I just went through it. Over 75%, if you just take care of the ones I just named, you're good to go. I mean, you really are. There's no guarantees in life, right? We can be exposed to crazy toxins that we don't even know about that could lead to cancer. But we do our best. All right. So I want to move on today's, which is this: how to burn fat as fuel while you sleep. And people will look at this and they'll dismiss it and they'll say, oh, that's all hype. It's never hype. It's never hype. There's no hype at all in my practice. And here's why. Just one last thing. Here's why. People come to me and our practice because they've tried everything else and it hasn't worked, or it's worked with some success and they relapse over and over. And they come to us because we have no hype. Our fat velocity system is not driven on hype. People think that when they first see it because that's where their mind goes to, and that's where this industry has been. I get it, but it's time to revolutionize the weight loss industry. It's time to base it on functional medicine rather than hype and marketing. And that's it. We're not marketers. What we do is we back things up with science and education. 25 specific citations. What's fat velocity? How does it work? Lowering cortisol, balancing healthy levels of estrogen and progesterone, balancing healthy levels of blood sugar, balancing healthy levels of inflammation, balancing healthy levels of appetite hormones, balancing healthy levels of thyroid, boosting thermogenesis, and improving deep sleep that we're going to talk about right now. None of that's hype. If you look at the label, there's no hype. It's 5 trademarked ingredients, plus all the others that are in there based on thousands of years of Ayurveda, right? And based on now modern day science. Okay, I'm going to read this to you. I want you to know this is not coming from my mouth. This is in the Annals of Internal Medicine, and this is now a decade old. The original science, let's see if I can get it for you, was done October 5th, 2010. This specific summary is by Dr. Merrill, a medical doctor, and I'm going to go into it right now. So here it is. I'm going to read it to you specifically, and then we'll go over it. There will be no big marketing budget behind this diet breakthrough, no FDA approvals, no celebrity endorsements. Research published this month in the Annals of Internal Medicine, one of the big kahunas of peer-reviewed medical journals, establishes that sleep and sleep alone is one of the most powerful diet tools ever identified. There's not a diet pill on the planet that could accomplish what sleep did in this study, which compared 2 groups of overweight non-smokers on calorie-restricted diets for 14 days. One group clocked 8.5 hours of sleep per night, and the other logged 5.5 hours of sleep per night, which the authors point out is a norm for people in this day and age. Both groups ate roughly 1,450 calories a day. After 2 weeks, the people who slept more lost more fat than the group who slept less. More than half of the weight loss during the 8.5 hours of sleep was fat versus only 1/4 of the weight loss during the 5.5 hours of sleep. People literally burned fat while they slept. Even more startling, the folks who slept less lost more muscle. 60% more muscle was lost by the sleep-deprived group. Those 3 hours of lost sleep caused a shift in metabolism that made the body want to preserve fat at the expense of muscle. And that's not all that happened. When the researchers compared circulating blood levels of appetite-regulating hormones in the two groups, they found those who slept 3 fewer hours had produced more of the appetite-stimulating hormone ghrelin. They woke up hungrier. Most of us assume our bodies burn more calories when we are awake longer, but that is not true. The metabolic rate is down-regulated with less sleep. Translation, when you sleep less, your body starts to burn calories at a slower rate to preserve energy. In the study, people burned on average 400 more calories by sleeping 3 more hours. That's an additional 2,800 calories burned in just 1 week. With less sleep, the body seeks to meet the increased metabolic needs of longer waking hours by shifting into a lower gear, so to speak, that burns fewer calories and less fat. Bottom line, if you want to burn fat, preserve muscle, and wake up less hungry when you are dieting, sleep more. 8.5 hours to be exact. So that's the end quote right there from Dr. Merrill, MD. So here's the thing. This is not the only study. This is one of many. I've quoted before the studies on if you sleep less than 6 hours per night, you will wake up typically with higher levels of blood sugar. And you can go back to my previous ones, and I'll link them up today at 1440, StephenCabral.com/1440. You're going to wake up with higher blood sugar. If you wake up with higher blood sugar, well, here's the thing. You might not even be hungry. That's an appetite suppressant in itself, higher blood sugar. And the other thing is you're not going to tap into body fat as well. So there's so many studies, not just this one, but let's look at this one. Now, you might say, oh, well, I sleep more than 5.5 hours. But if you're not sleeping at least 7, there's a downregulation of metabolism. And if those 7 hours aren't quality, meaning if your deep sleep score isn't an hour and a half or at least above an hour, you're not going to be firing all cylinders. And here's the thing. And true appetite suppressant is when we look at leptin and ghrelin, right? I did a podcast on that. Check out that podcast on leptin and ghrelin. It's called the 2 fat-burning hormones. So we really have to understand that weight loss is a science. And the science is simply not eat less and burn more. And I know I keep going back to that, but because that's what you're being told. And it's not true. It's only true if you're drinking like a big gulp soda at 7-Eleven, if you're eating ice cream before bed, cookies before bed. Yes, you can't do that. I'm not saying you can do that. I'm not saying sleep 7, 8, 9 hours and then go eat cookies before bed. I'm not saying that. So what I'm saying is eat healthy, exercise, move your body, no doubt about it, but also start to do the other things, which I talk about in the de-stress protocol. In our Fatlocity system, we give you 8 parts: diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, rest, deep sleep, parasympathetic, right? We talk about emotional balance. We talk about supplement protocols, and we talk about having a success mindset. All of those things matter. They truly do. There's not one way to burn body fat, but I can assure you, when you use a full system, it may not happen overnight, especially if your thyroid's imbalanced, you have estrogen dominance, you have blood sugar dysregularity, and higher cortisol. It's going to take a little time, but here's the nice thing. If you're not that imbalanced, you will lose weight quickly within the first 21 to 28 days. No doubt about it. And here's the other nice thing. You're doing something that's healthy for your body. This is not about short-term results. If you get the short-term results, great. This is about rebalancing the body over a period of 12 weeks or 3 to 6 months. You need to work on creating healthier cells. Your body's made up of 40 trillion cells. You need stronger mitochondria. You need better balanced cell membranes so that they better accept glucose in the bloodstream. Remember, if those insulin receptors on the outside of your cells are blocked, good luck getting the glucose into your cell to actually use as energy. It's going to float around. And your body's going to be able to use that as fuel instead of tapping into body fat. So these things are so crucially important to understand, and going on a super low carb diet is not the answer either. We use that in the beginning as well. We use a strategic low carb diet as well because it does work. But it stops working. No one ever tells you this. It stops working between 3 and 6 weeks, which is exactly when we start to reintroduce more carbohydrates, which does what? Oh, it helps to rebalance thyroid. It helps to lower cortisol levels, helps you sleep better. So again, you want a full comprehensive protocol. And we do have to understand that there are levels to this. That if you are starving your body, it is not good for muscle loss as well. They talked about this in the study. Why does that matter? You'll see in the study, both groups lost weight. The problem was the group who slept less, a lot of that weight loss was actually muscle. You might say, well, that's okay with me. I don't want to look big and bulky. Well, here's the thing. Muscle is what keeps you looking toned. Muscle is what actually uses the most calories during the day, meaning for physical-based work. So you have your basal metabolic rate, you have your rate at which you burn calories on a daily basis, just being alive, laying in bed. But then your muscles require more calories as you even just walk and as you move. And if you have less muscle, which by the way, the average woman is going to lose 5+ pounds every decade, and that adds up. That adds up. That's super important to look at that. Why? Well, it affects your body's strength and endurance and energy and mitochondria. Like, it all matters. And you're just simply put, your body's ability to burn calories. So, again, this is not a shot at. This is not condemning anyone else's work. It's not that. What I want to do is use other people's work and just say, okay, in conjunction with that, let's look at metabolism. Let's look at beyond dieting and exercise. Use dieting and exercise, but let's look at also what other factors may be at play here in order to help people get well, to lose the weight, to be healthier, to live a longer life, and to be happier. That's what it's all about. So hopefully today's podcast was helpful. I'm going to link up all the previous 5-factor podcasts today so you can learn more about estrogen and thyroid and cortisol and blood sugar and thermogenesis so that you have the full picture. And you can also read about them just briefly. It's just a brief introduction at equilibriumnutrition.com/fatlocity. Remember, just like they said in this article, we are not trying to sell diet pills to people. What we're trying to do is help people rebalance their metabolism. And part of that is sleep, which is why you'll see that in Fatlocity Night, we try to engage people to a deeper night's sleep. That's what it's all about. But again, never anything to buy. Simply listen to the information. Begin to use it in your life. And if it works for you, if you understand it, if you feel it's a good fit, as always, if you could please share this information with someone else, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Be well, and I will talk with you tomorrow. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.